see, give me 1 second. Okay, you should all see a presentation that says the information session will begin shortly. Does that seem right? Okay, good. Okay, so now we can begin. Michelle, I'll let you introduce yourself first, and then I can jump in after that.
Sounds good. Hey, everybody. My name is Michelle Montgomery, and I'm the co-director of the fellowship program. And I just want to say on behalf of the fellowship team that I would like to welcome you to today's session. This is a time for you to feel free to ask any questions. We're going to go over some information, but we have a lot of time allotted for question and answer at the end. And so if you think of any questions as we're talking, if you can just drop them in the chat, we will answer them at the end of our presentation. And we look forward to hearing from a lot of you. Or if you don't want to drop it in the chat, but you actually want to say your question out loud, just use the raise hand feature. We truly appreciate that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Eric.
Great. All right, so thank you, Michelle. A few things. My name is Eric Figueroa. I am a senior policy analyst at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and I work for the State Fiscal Project, and that's the group at the center that works on a state policy, as the name implies. And with Michelle, I'm a co-director of this fellowship program, so I'm thrilled to be here to tell you more about it. And answer those questions you have. So super quick today, we're going to just give you a quick overview of the program, some of the nuts and bolts of how it works, how it's sort of shaped and the goals behind it, and then spend the bulk of our time, like Michelle said, answering the questions you have as we come up on the February 18th deadline. So about 18 days from now, the deadline's coming up. So folks, get your stuff together, get ready, get those questions ready. Before I dive into the program, I just wanted to quickly put in a plug for working at the state level. I know that federal policy gets a lot of attention, rightfully so. They're working with trillions of dollars and they affect millions and millions of people. But I come from a state background. I spent my formative years working at the Arizona State Capitol right out of undergrad. And I will say that the experience I had there with government and with policymaking was some of the best experience I've ever gained for a few reasons. One, because I realized how much the state budget affects everything that we care about, from the schools that kids go to the healthcare systems that are available to us, to the public health systems that we now depend on so critically, to the roads and bridges and all that. I mean, all that gets touched by the state government, the state budget. So I think there's a ton of work to be done there. And then I'll also say, I think there's much more access at the state level. You are closer to the decision makers. You have the ability to have much more influence on the system. So that's my pitch to you all about state work. Okay, we're here to talk about the State Policy Fellowship Program. This is a project coordinated by the State Priorities Partnership. I'm going to throw a lot of names and acronyms at you. What you need to know is that the Center on Budget on Policy Priorities plays a key role organizing, funding, and sort of facilitating this fellowship. And the idea with the fellowship is that we place research analysts, essentially, in one of our 40 plus state-based nonprofit research organizations. They are a network of independent organizations in most of the states in the country. And they do a lot of that same type of work that the center does, looking at budgets, looking at state taxation, and trying to make those more equitable for folks through policy research and advocacy. So that is the goal of the fellowship, to place folks there. And you spend 2 years working with these folks as part of the fellowship. The three main goals that we have that are part of this fellowship are, number one, to make a difference in vulnerable families and communities. That is sort of the cornerstone of why we do this work and why we place fellows where we do, to add capacity, to sort of have more ability to influence change that makes people's lives better. And so that's what we look for in folks who are passionate about that and want to do that work, because that is truly at the core of what we do. The second reason we do this is to bring more diverse perspectives into these policy spaces. Historically, it's been white men mostly. So anything we can do to infuse more diversity, more lived experience, makes those policy discussions richer, and more, more informed by the people actually affected by these policies and these programs. So I think that's huge. And then the third major goal is to launch careers. This is meant to be a leadership development opportunity. We want folks who are ambitious, who want to grow in their professions, who want to learn from these 2 years and take that knowledge and really impact the communities they care about in many different ways. And we have folks who stay with their SPP group, their state group, and become leaders there. We have others who join state government, federal government, city government. And there are folks who take their skills in all different directions, but always with the sort of the mission of making people's lives better. And so we are all about that in this work. Michelle, I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit about, once you're in the fellowship, what that looks like.
Yeah. And so with all the information Eric just provided to us, you're probably wondering, what should you expect from the fellowship program if you're able to get into it? And so what it offers is a 2-year paid position. Yes, you get paid as a policy analyst at one of our partnership organizations, or either at CBPP when we have one available. You get on the ground supervision and support from state policy experts within your organization and the network. You also receive robust networking and professional development opportunities from us here at CBPP, but also outside. There is also ongoing equity and inclusion training and management support for not only the fellows, but also for their supervisors. And then who is eligible, as Eric mentioned, passionate change makers who are just beginning or are early on in their careers, who want to have a career in professional policy and research areas. As of today, we have 63 current and former state policy fellows, in which, as we already mentioned, we're bringing on 6 more this coming year. So we're really excited about that. Out of that number, 88% identify as Indigenous and or people of color, 73 are women, and 14 are LGBTQ community. We also offer ongoing support and long-term support. During the fellowship, fellows receive intense training, assistance, and resources to prepare them for the leadership in their organizations and the communities they serve. We also coordinate events and other opportunities that provide program support and guidance to fellows and their supervisors. We've seen these efforts really pay off, because out of the 43 alumni that we have that transition out of the program, we have 13 that remain in the network, or they work directly with CBPP, and 6 of those are actually in leadership positions. We have another 23 alumni that work in state or national nonprofits, and some of those are in leadership positions as well, and then state or local government. Just in matter of some of the specific supports that we provide to the fellows, you receive yearly gatherings at our new staff training, which is typically in September of every year. And then we also have a fellows convening, which is in November, December of every year, where we just build on skills and different professional development, but also a time for fellows to just network and just have a peer learning space. We also have ongoing equity and inclusion training and management support for supervisors. We have monthly video calls where we hash through some issues. We also have hands-on training where we can workshop, but we also provide professional and emotional support for one another in the program. And sometimes we do invite the alumni in that space as well. But then we also have some support for the fellows as they transition out of their placements. As Eric mentioned, sometimes fellows do stay within our organizations, but sometimes they do transition out to other organizations. So we do have some support where we provide there. And I'm passing it back to you, Eric.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Michelle. So we are lucky enough to have 6 spots available this year. The number of spots fluctuates based on sort of grant support we get and then sort of different funding criteria, but we have 6 available this year. Colorado, California, Mississippi, Maryland, and Maine are all sort of our general tax and budget fellows positions. But general tax and budget can cover, like I said, healthcare, K-12 education, immigration issues in the past. We've had fellows do all kinds of different things in different sort of state budget context. And we have one position that is sort of specifically tailored to state tribal policy in Montana. And that's one where we have, we're trying to specifically seed policy support and policy sort of capacity around state tribal policy. And so that's part of an ongoing effort to really target that area as an area of growth for us and for the network. So that's why that position is specifically has specific criteria and is designed around state tribal policy. Let's see, let's talk about next steps. So who should apply? Michelle, I think said it really perfectly. Where passionate change makers is sort of the baseline in your core, what we're looking for. And then on top of that, we have some sort of more criteria type things. Folks with a college degree plus 2 years of relevant research or advocacy experience, or folks with a graduate degree in a related field. And related is very broad, related MSWs, MPAs, MPPs, social work, economics. Really, I think if you make a case in your cover letter that you're coming from marine biology, but you have a passion for climate and state tax policy, then we are all for it and we want to hear from you. So that is a broad umbrella. Of course, we want people with strong quantitative and writing skills. You will be doing a lot of writing and doing some quantitative work, looking at state budgets and state taxation. So that's sort of bread and butter to this work. Familiarity with state tax policy is a plus, but not a requirement. We can teach you a lot about state tax and budget policy. You will learn on the job. So I think that's one of those where passion is really more important sometimes than background knowledge and content. So I don't want people to feel like I don't know anything about state budgets, so I'm not qualified. I think if you have a passion, we will teach you. And then the ability to work full-time in the United States for at least the 2-year duration of the program is sort of the baseline commitment we're looking for. And that speaks a little bit to folks on different visas, student visas, things like that. We do not sponsor visas, but if you have that ability already to work 2 years and you can show that, then you're fine. Next, let's talk about what you'll need to submit. So we asked for some of the basics: a resume, a cover letter, and I will stress that the cover letter is really your chance to tell us about yourself. We read every single one of these cover letters, so please be very, very deliberate about what you tell us, and spend some time answering the few prompts we have that sort of go into the cover letter. That is our chance to get to know you. That's your chance to tell us about why you care about this work and why it means something to you. And then we also ask for an equity and inclusion statement. Race equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion have been really important to our organization and to this fellowship over the last, and in growing importance over the last few years. So we want folks to tell us specifically, explicitly, why they care about those issues, what they sort of, how they bring that lens to their work, to their academic career, to the professional career, and what they see as the importance of that work in this sort of economic fiscal policy world. We also ask for 2 writing samples. This gives us a sense of your ability to really, take complicated ideas and then describe them concisely, and that's super important in a policy atmosphere. And then, so one of them is a short writing sample, and that could be a blog post or a policy memo you've done for class or for work. And then the other one is a longer example, no more than 8 pages. So that shows something more of a detailed research, your detailed research abilities, a research paper, or maybe a longer report that you've worked on or contributed to. And then lastly, we ask for 2 letters of recommendation, and that at least one of them speak to your research abilities, either potential, if you've sort of haven't done really hands-on research yet, or experience if you've worked with, say, a professor or a boss on a research project. That again helps us sort of understand your research ability, your research potential going forward, since this is as a research analyst type position. So with that, we are ready for questions. And I'll end my screen share too, if that's helpful.
So Eric, we do have one question in the chat from Abby, who asks, do reference pages count toward the page limit for the writing samples?
I mean, I think we asked for no more than 8. So I think if you have something I mean, really no more than 8. And that's just to say, because we read every single one of them. So if you end up submitting a 4-page excerpt, that's fine too. Really, it's just the high end. And so you can count towards it, I guess, if you want, but it doesn't matter to us necessarily.
And can you stop the screen share so we can?
Oh yeah, sorry. Let's see.
That's okay. And feel free to raise y'all virtual hands too, if you don't want to use the chat. And please correct me if I mispronounce this. I'm sorry. Zaing Maui. Did I do that right?
Yes, you said it correctly.
Oh, awesome. You asked, can you work online? So I guess remotely is the question. So as of right now, none of the partnership organizations have returned to the office full time. A lot of our organizations have it on a volunteer basis, and they're rethinking how they're working because, of course, the pandemic has really helped to shape the narrative of, not everybody needs to be in the office all the time at the same time. And so that is a great possibility that you'll be able to work remotely, but it may not be fully remote. You may have to go into the office a few times, but that is a great possibility. That's something you would definitely want to work out with the organization if you're awarded the fellowship. Adriana says, are there placements remote or is relocation required? That's TBD, kind of to the same question. We're not 100% sure at this time. A lot of organizations, as I mentioned, are open to some remote work, but fully remote, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, and I guess I would say too, I mean, one, what Michelle said is right. Like those are discussions you have in the interview process as you start to work out the details. But I think I would lean towards the side of eventually having to relocate to the state. So picking a state that you would be willing to relocate to, because it's a 2-year fellowship, and hopefully within those 2 years, things will come back to some element of normal. And a lot of this work does get done at the state capitol. So there's a physical element of being in place in the committee hearing rooms and taking meetings with legislators. So there's some aspect of that would probably have to be back in the state eventually. So
yeah, and to that point too, if you're advocating for a certain community, you kind of want to get acclimated with that community too, to kind of be able to speak for them. So can you indicate a state you wish to work in?
yeah, so within ADP, so the ADP is the system that you'll use. When you eventually go on to the online application, there's a drop-down menu and lets you pick up to 3 locations that you'd like to select to work in. And I urge folks to be really deliberate about which states they pick, because we ask you to sort of explain why you care about that state or why you're interested in that state. And so there's not an inherent advantage to picking all 3. Especially if you say, well, by the 3rd one, if you just say, I just picked it because it gives me another shot at another place, that's not a reason that really carries a lot of weight. We want to know that you care about it, or you have a connection to it, or that something about that place is interesting to you or exciting to you, and that you really care to work there. That's sort of what we're looking for when you pick those locations.
Mm-hmm. What Katrina asked, what is the typical timeline for application to announcement of selected fellows? Application closes February the 18th. And then we're hoping that if you're moved on to the next round, meaning you will have a interview with the organization that's early to mid-March, hoping that by mid-April, we will have fellows finalized and have actual start dates lined up. But we do ask that all fellows start no later than August the 1st. You would definitely want to negotiate with the organization when you can start, but we ask that you start no later than August the 1st. That way you will be acclimated with your organization at least for a few weeks before you start new staff training, whereas you will be immersed in the whole network of new staff that have started in the last year. Jackie, you have your hand up.
Hi, yes, thanks. I'm calling in from the new school in Brooklyn, or in New York, but I'm in Brooklyn. I was wondering about in terms of like how often the fellowships open, in part because I'm finishing out my degree still, and I'm like relocation is complicated by finishing out my degree and having to be somewhere. And I was wondering if it's happening if it happens every 2 years or if like next year's if it's every year, given that it's a 2-year commitment, and again realities of relocation is differed by my degree. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so we are lucky enough to have support to do a class every year in the next 2 years. So again, look for around Thanksgiving of this year of 2022 for us to start announcing or start to spread the word about another set of openings. I want to say there's going to be between 5 to 6 new locations going into 2023, and the states are TBD. So we will go through another process of picking state locations and figuring out where those will be. So it'll be different than this year's and different than last year's too. So
yeah, it makes sense. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
To Suzanne's question about salary, that's negotiated with the organization, but the minimum is 50,000. No fellow earns less than 50,000 a year. And that comes with benefits as well. So you have a salary, but you also have benefits. Those benefits vary depending on the organizations. And so we wouldn't be able to get specific information on that, but it does come with benefits as well. Sophie, you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you guys so much for providing all these resources. I have a question kind of in the same vein of Eric was talking about kind of saying which states you were interested in working with and not over selecting. If you're really passionate about one state and you feel like the fiscal policy kind of landscape there matches your policy interests or something, would you recommend kind of covering that within the cover letter and kind of tailoring it to that fit within that one state and just going with that one? Is that something that you see, or would you recommend making it more general?
I love if someone cares about a state, has worked in a state, like maybe, you don't have to necessarily have grown up, because we've had plenty of fellows who have moved to a new place and done tremendous work. So it's not necessarily that, but I think if you can make a case in the cover letter, in your, where you pick your state, anywhere you can tell us why you care about that place and what really intrigues you and what really excites you, because you think about your audience is also the state group who lives and breathes the policy work in that place. And so they like light up when they see someone who like cares about what they do. So anything you can do to sort of tell that story is super helpful, I think.
And
Awesome.
I would just add that just remember, like, your application, your cover letter is your first interview. You are telling us all about you before we even get a chance to talk to you. So definitely as much information, as much as an impact that you can make in that cover letter would be helpful, because as Eric mentioned earlier, we read every single letter line by line, but also the organizations read those materials as well. So definitely make your case in that cover letter, because again, I look at that as like your first interview without even talking with someone.
Thank you guys.
You're welcome. Maggie Jean Knight said, is CBPP looking at working with additional states this coming year? Now, does that mean for this round or for the next round? If you can answer that for us.
Yeah, hi, Michelle. I am currently still in school, so I'm looking at applying next year. So I was wondering if this coming cycle, new states might be added.
Yes. We usually do not do the same states every cycle, maybe not even every other cycle. We just look at the need of the organizations and make a decision from there. So yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Katrina said, if we apply and are not selected this year, can we apply again in the future year?
Yeah, please. Many times it's just a matter of fit. It depends on the state, maybe they're looking for something specific or a certain policy area that you may not have, but the next year is a different state and a different need sometimes too. So I really encourage folks to apply, even if you didn't get in this year, apply again next year. And we try our best also to keep keep a kind of a running list of folks to like spread the word again to, if you didn't make it this year, to try to sort of let you know that the opportunity is open again, and try to keep those channels open, because yeah, it's an opportunity that rotates and is open again and again each year. So.
And another thing I would just add, that even if you're not selected for the fellowship, there are times where we will hear from organizations who are looking for like an early career policy analyst, and they'll reach out to, tap into the pool of applicants that may not have been selected. And so we do pass on information that way as well. So, as Eric mentioned, keep trying, keep in contact with us, and we do try to look out for you. Zain?
Yes, I have another question, kind of similar to what Jackie was asking. I'm currently in my PhD program, and I'm just a second year, so I still have like a couple more years to complete. So I was like, if I could work remotely, it might be a good opportunity for me. But like, I also saw it in the email sent out about this seminar, this info session, that the applicants, like the majority of the applicants are like, it seems to be aiming at people who completed their master degree and like maybe bachelor holders or something. So is it something that is a good fit for someone who's like still in their PhD and things like that, or is just more oriented toward like people with bachelor and master?
I'm not going to say it's geared towards any in specific. We do have some who completed their PhD, who are pursuing their PhD. We have 2 that had a law degree. So I'm not going to say it's geared toward any. You would definitely be a great candidate even in your PhD program, because like I mentioned, we have some that have finished their masters, and then they're working on their PhD currently. So
Yeah.
Okay, thank
You
you
can
so
look at,
much.
I think you can think of those as the minimum requirements, and so you are above and beyond the minimums at this point. So yeah, I think that's right.
Thank you, Erin.
any other questions?
I'll ask a question. Is there support for I know there may not be financial support, but in terms of relocation to the state, if you're not already there, how is that transition process?
We do have a small bucket to help with some relocation assistance. So, if a fellow does have to relocate to another state to complete their fellowship, that's definitely something that we can assist with. Sometimes organizations may help as well, but we definitely have some finances to help with that.
But also just like giving people like ideas of like housing and where to look and that kind of help.
Yeah, the organizations are really good about that. Yeah.
Great.
Are there multiple fellows at any locations or fellows in their second year there? Yes, we actually have. Well, I don't want to take all of them, Eric. You can go.
Well, go ahead and finish your thought, and then
Okay.
I'll jump in. Yeah.
No, to say yes. We currently have 2 fellows at one organization started at the same time. There are times that there is an overlap. Actually, in California, as one fellow will be beginning this cohort, we will have one finishing. So we've had multiple situations where either one was leaving or one was transitioned, or we have 2 at a time. So yes, we have had that.
And then the only thing I was going to add is that you have in some organizations alumni too, who were fellows maybe a few years ago, who have transitioned to permanent staff and who are there now as fellow analysts or as leadership too. So I think there's a sort of a network built in a lot of ways in some of these organizations for fellows, and they look out for other fellows because they know what it is to have been a fellow. So I think that's an extra bonus. So.
Yeah, and one of the beautiful things, we actually had one fellow alumni who was a leader of an organization who was able to hire another fellow alumni to come work with them. And then they ended up getting a fellow this last cohort. So as Eric mentioned, they really do look out for each other. And, it's a really tight knit community. It's really a beautiful thing. The fellowship has been around, this is the 12th year. And so to have that many fellows and alumni, like you can just really see the community growing and just becoming stronger with each cohort. Have any of the locations this year not had fellows before?
Yeah,
Yes.
so Mississippi and Maine have never had fellows before. And then the other four, Colorado, California, Maryland, and Montana have each had a fellow, at least one fellow before.
Mhm. And Colorado and Montana and California actually have alumni there.
Yeah.
Jackie?
Maybe one follow-up question. In terms of looking at, I'm just curious about like what it looked like to look at the need of different. So I'm familiar with CBP and in part because I did AmeriCorps with Feeding Texas, and I'm interested to know like what type of need it looks like, particularly because most of it's state and tax space. In terms of, and I'm also curious about how outreach is looking different for Indigenous communities, given that you're actually looking at tribal law. Sorry, that was like 3 questions at once, but I'm very interested about how it got here.
So I'll take on, you're talking about the policy need in each one of these places, that kind of, okay. Yeah, I mean, it all depends. I think you gotta think of the fellow sort of almost as a generalist, and you fill maybe some gaps that are already existing. So say the organization wants to take on more kind of workers' rights type law or early childhood development. I'm using California as an example. Those are 2 issues that they've mentioned wanting to sort of take on, but don't have capacity. So those are areas where the fellow might take on the portfolio of those bills, that legislation, writing reports around that, doing that kind of research. That said, if you come to the table with your own background and your own expertise in childcare law or childcare policy, say, those are discussions you can have when you do the interview process too with each of the organizations, and say like they'll see on your resume that this is what you care about, this is some of the expertise you have. And then maybe there's ways to sort of work around that. Or if you have no expertise and you're just ready to learn anything new, there's that opportunity too, because you will learn by doing the research around that policy area. If that makes sense. And then on the tribal front, it's a new area, and really you are working at the crossroads of state law, state policy, and tribal sovereignty, tribal law, tribal self-governance too. For many tribes, they're sort of their own legal entity. So there's a lot of interactions in taxation, in healthcare provision. Tribal members who don't live on the reservation maybe get healthcare through the state Medicaid system. And there's interactions with state law to the federal system that the state administers. So there's a bunch of ways, complicated ways, no doubt, but ways that the state interacts with tribal communities. And so that's sort of where we're trying to build capacity with these fellows. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Eric and Michelle, if we're winding down on questions, we'll see if there's anything else. But if folks want to ask anything as a follow-up, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure, you can absolutely send me an email and I'll put it in the chat. Anything you have, any questions at all, you can use this email to reach out to me, ask me your questions. And if it's easier, sometimes we can set up a quick phone call. I've been doing that a lot, one-on-one phone calls with many applicants who have questions about the application, the states, the sort of what they need to submit and what they should do, and any advice otherwise. So I'm absolutely happy to meet with you. I have an open digital door policy until the application's done, and even beyond that too. I'm always available. So if you have questions, please let me know. Great. I'm glad you all can join us. Thank you for your interest. We really
We
appreciate it.
hope to see y'all's names come across our desk, our virtual desk.
Yeah. I will share one more thing with you all too. Since you're all sort of graduating soon, take a look at the center's career page too, just generally. I feel like we are always hiring, and there's positions for analysts, sort of entry level policy analysts. So definitely take a look at that as well.
Great, that's terrific. Thanks so much, Eric and Michelle. We really appreciate your time today. And yes, we hope that many of the students here today will apply, and those who couldn't make it today, but we'll send out the information to everybody. So we appreciate it. All right, stay safe, everyone, and be well. Thanks again.
Thank you.